Kishwar?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Hello and welcome to the first episode of season 2 of Gupshup with Gayatri. Old world conversations with new age technology. It's been nearly 3 months since we had the last Gupshup with the awe inspiring Vijay Venkatesh. So here's a refresher on Gupshup. Gupshup is a series of light and casual conversations on topical issues with domain experts. But light does not mean it's frivolous. Casual does not make it flippant. Gupshup is not gossip. Does that mean no uncomfortable questions will be asked? They will, but not in the India wants to know, Bharat puchta hai kind of way. So you needn't worry, Kishwar. The concept behind season 1 of Gupshup with Gayatri was simple. Interview outstanding LSR alumni and beat the lockdown blues. This season, we'll be doing that and much more, and hopefully without the lockdown. The first edition of Gupshup was on 28th June with the award winning journalist and writer Anu Singh Chaudhary, the one who co wrote the Sushmita Sen serial Arya. Gupshup then went on to discuss different things from films to food, financial planning, feng shui, education, demography, and cancer care. That's because Gupshup is a chat in the company of family and friends. It's the kind of conversation you would normally have in the safety and security of your living room. It's an endeavor to start conversations because these days we don't talk, we debate, and debates can be toxic. Gupshup is broad in its scope, but what makes it truly unique is the interactive nature of the interview. The audience is empowered to ask questions both during and after the conversation. So please write to us, please send in your comments, please share your thoughts in the chat box, and keep yourselves on mute to prevent any technical glitches. Let me now turn to our guest for today. Our special guest on the very first episode of season 2 is the very beautiful, charming, talented Kishwar Desai. Or I should say, Lady Kishwar Desai. It's such an honor and privilege to have you here, Kishwar. As
Okay.
many of you know, Kishwar has a vast body of work, including fiction, non-fiction, biographies, lot of syndicated columns. She's a trustee with the Gandhi Statue Memorial Trust, which helped set up the statue of Mahatma Gandhi at Westminster in London. She's also the chairperson of the Arts and Cultural Heritage Trust that set up the world's first Partition Museum and Memorial in Amritsar. We'll come to that later. Kishwar, we'd like to begin with your latest offering, the new biography that you've written, The Longest Kiss, Life and Times of Devika Rani. Can you explain this tantalizing title, please?
Thank you, Gayatri, and thank you everyone for joining us today because I know the virtual world is getting as crowded as the real world with lots of events and things happening every day. Uh, Regarding my book, The Longest Kiss, I have to say that this book has been very, very dear to me. It's taken me over 15 years to write a collection of lots and lots of material from everywhere. So in between, when I was doing all the other things that you listed, I was constantly thinking about Devika at the back of my mind and how was I ever going to write this book. The title comes from her very first film called Karma. This was screened in 1933. She made her debut in it. And the interesting thing was that it was screened at Marble Arch in London. Devika was an international star when she arrived. That was her very first film. She was also the great grandniece of Rabindranath Tagore. And she made this film with her husband, Himanshu Rai. It had an international cast and crew, which of course we'll discuss later. Um, in this film is this very, very iconic scene that you actually see on the cover. And I'll just
Yeah.
hold up the book for you, and you see Himanshu and Devika right there smooching each other, and it is considered still to be the longest kiss in Indian cinema, and actually physically, because people at that time were, I think, quite scandalized to see a sari clad woman practically lying on top of this guy and kissing him with such abandon. Of course, the film was released in the UK, in Britain first. So as a result, I think people were not so scandalized as they may have been in India at that time. And Gayatri, as you know, subsequently, after a few years, not because of this case, but because we as Indians can be very prudish, kissing was completely banned. So I think till today, it probably still holds the record for being the longest kiss. People thought it was 5 minutes, but I've timed it. It's actually a little less than 2 minutes. Probably looks that long because we are so unused to it. But I have to say, for me to choose it as a title was, yes, to make people aware of the fact that this woman was a rebel. She was always into living on the edge, breaking all the rules, even though she came from this extremely well-known family. She really wanted to do things, break the glass ceiling before we even talked about glass ceilings, and she did it. And as I'm sure we'll discover during the course of this conversation. So I think I wanted to depict her as somebody who was different, who's very beautiful, as you can see even in this photograph, who was brilliant. She even wrote the script, the original screenplay for this film, though she didn't get the credit for it. And at a very, I can say, metaphorical level, I called it the longest kiss because people have been somewhere or the other, Indian cinema audiences, enchanted by her, even through the years, even when they forgot all about her. Every now and then, a song of hers would pop up, or something would come up. So there was also that longest kiss that she enjoyed with the Indian audiences. And then, of course, it also refers to her own very passionate love affairs and so on. So there were two or three different levels at which I used this title, but I hope it tantalizes everybody into buying the book and reading the book. And lastly, I also want to say is that I'm a romantic. I'm a complete romantic. I love stories that have happy endings, and I love stories which prove to us over and over again that love, no matter what you love, be it your work, be it another man, woman, whatever, uh, that relationship is something you live for. And I think Devika proved that over and over again in all her relationships with both her husbands. So I think that was the other reason why I called it the longest kiss, the romance of it.
Yeah. Wow. So I will come to your love for romance later, Kishwar, when we discuss your personal journey. Your love for romance, we will go back to it there. And it's lovely that you mentioned about, how people through the music, they keep going back to Devika. And in fact, that is my memory of Devika also. My grandmother, my Dadi ji, I remember she used to be a fan of Ashok Kumar. And she would sing, she would hum the song from Achut Kanya. And that was my introduction to Devika Rani. And I remember seeing, I mean, she was just so beautiful. But it's really incredible to think that her debut was in London. Her debut feature film released in London and not in India. You have so many international collaborations. This is pre the Second World War. This is the 1930s. I mean, we talk now of international collaborations, but there was so much going on even then.
Right. I think that was the other reason why I wrote this book. And I was so fascinated by Devika and her first husband, Himanshu, and Bombay Talkies, and everything they did at that time. Because initially, Himanshu, her husband, he was also a very very, very well-known actor by the time he set up Bombay Talkies. He was also a producer. But his debut was not in India. It was on stage as a stage actor in London
London.
and on the West End. And the play he did ran for months. So we now get very excited when an Indian, emerges in the Western world, but we've completely forgotten that this couple was a much fated couple, much admired couple. When this debut film opened at Marble Arch Theatre just off Oxford Street in London, there were 400 lords, ladies, knights, dames, all the aristocrats of London turning out to see this film. And she got the kind of dream reviews which no Indian actress till today. So we talk about 1933, and we're now in 2021. So in all these years, there has never been another actress who's got the kind of dream reviews she got. And she immediately started getting offers from British studios, from even a couple of suggestions that she go to Hollywood and things like that. And as I said, we get very excited when we hear about all this. And this was, yes, you're right, this was a film made in collaboration with British technicians. And I think this is, again, something we have completely forgotten. British and Germans, they both participated. So it was a cosmopolitan group that worked on Karma. And Karma itself was a talkie. It was the first talkie that was made by Himanshu and Devika. It was not the first Indian talkie, certainly not. It also was very unique because it was made in 2 languages. Again, today, we say, oh, wow, how innovative is that? People are making films in different. It was made both in Hindi and in English. It was partly shot in India, partly shot in the UK. And so, there were many things, many innovative things which they tried out in Karma. And certainly when Devika appeared on screen, you can say very easily a star was born. And nobody looking at her could even imagine that it was her first film. She sang beautifully. She looked gorgeous. The art design was partly done by her, though again, she didn't get the credit for it. She was, of course, trained in Germany at a studio along with her husband, how to act in talkies, because as I said, this is the first talkie Himanshu also did. Before this, he was doing silent cinema. So it was a very exciting period for them, very, very tough period. It was not easy to make a film then for anybody. I'm not saying just for Indians, but for anybody, because as you mentioned, 1933, before the before partition, certainly, and before Indian cinema had been set up. So the funding was also largely done through various sources. It was partly a little bit raised abroad, but mostly raised in India for this film.
Yeah. Just to tell our audience, you've mentioned in your book that when this film was released, it was one of the best films of 1926. And for the other...
No, that was another film. That was another film, which was called The Light of Asia.
That was Light of Asia. That was Light of Asia.
Yeah, on the life of the Buddha, which was a silent film made by Himanshu.
Rai. Yeah.
Yes, Himanshu, along with the Germans. I mean, there he used German technicians and directors and so on. And, he was able to produce this film with great difficulty, again, raising money in India. And this was his first production, but it was a hit because, the Germans were very, very keen to project themselves as people who could communicate through cinema. And a lot of studios were coming up in Germany at that time. And I think he was able to cash in on that. He spent a lot of time in Germany, Himanshu, but at that time, he and Devika were not a couple. They met a few years after that, yes.
What I was trying to say was Himanshu's Light of Asia was one of the most successful films of the year in 26, and the other films were Charlie Chaplin's Gold Rush and Ben-Hur's Thief of Baghdad,
which was running at that time.
That time. So I mean,
that was he was competing. He was competing against that. But Himanshu, I have to mention, her husband was a very, very canny marketing person, along with his partner at that time, Niranjan Pal, who was the screenplay writer of that film. And so what they did was, because they could not get an audience for this film in London, they decided to appeal to the king and queen at that time to see the film. So they actually went to Windsor Castle and went and showed them the film. And, it was quite amusing because apparently the king falls asleep in the middle of the film, all sorts of things happen. But what they find is kind of very good is that it's a great marketing strategy, because they start writing letters to everybody. Do you know that the king and queen actually of England actually saw this film, and suddenly the queues started appearing outside, the theater where they were showing the film, and there was no houseful sign, and then suddenly they had to create a sign and do that. So that's how Himanshu learned the hard way at that time. He had no mentors. He was on his own in England, trying to create cinema which would appeal to a Western audience. So, Gayatri, I have to say one thing, that most of his cinema at that time, we talk about Orientalism and things like that. We talk about Slumdog Millionaire and so on, which is made with quite a eye on the Western audience. And so I think these were early films. They were good films, but they were all made with an eye to the Western audience, including Karma, which he made later with. So, what was with Devika. And what was amazing for me was when I saw these films. So there are many reasons why I feel bad. I really do, as Indians, that we have not made more of this kind of cinema, which was coming out in the 20s and the 30s. One was their very, very wonderful, photography, the kind of presentation that they did, and so on, and the acting and so on. It was these films were doing extremely well. These films are doing extremely well at that time, and they were, as I said, made for a European audience. Yet they used Indian actors and actresses. So this was cinema made much before its time. We still make that kind of cinema today, but we make a big deal out of it. But these guys who were doing it at that time were very successful in what they did. So we have to give them full credit for that. And indeed, when I started my research on Devika and Bombay Talkies and Himanshu, her first husband, I was just shocked at the dearth of material. There was just no material on them anywhere. I mean, I cannot tell you where all I went hunting for that material, including, even when I went to Germany, I looked there at that time, which was about 16 years ago. There was nothing. There was very little available on them. In America, there was a bit, but not a lot. In Pune, in India, in Pune, in Bombay, in Bangalore, where she lived. I mean, I went everywhere hunting, and I would, so I was constantly accumulating bits and pieces here and there. But it was for me a tragedy that this was a couple, this was a team, and even Himanshu on his own, before he met Devika, was making these fabulous films. But when I went to the National Film Archives of India, I really had to hunt for their films. And I'm talking a long time back. Probably now things have changed, but it was difficult to find. But once I saw their cinema, I just fell in love. Beautifully shot, very well executed for that time, for that period. That they were doing these very exciting films for a European audience that loved it. They were very successful.
Coming to Devika's personal life, she was 21 when she married Himanshu, and he was 37. And unfortunately, the romance was short lived because then he abused her. She became a victim of domestic abuse. You've mentioned
Yes,
that in the book.
yes,
Letters.
yes. Right. Well, initially, I would say when they met, he did, she was so gorgeous. And I think he just realized that he'd met somebody that he could spend the rest of his life with. Himanshu was a bit of a philanderer. He was. He was a young, upcoming actor and producer. At least that's the way he saw himself. And and he was also very good looking. So I'm sure there were a lot of women enamored by him, and I have the letters to prove the letters from those women who were madly in love with him,
While
saying,
reading the book, I thought you were
Himanshu,
also enamored by him, Kishwar. I thought maybe.
I don't know. I have, Himanshu is an extremely talented man, but he's also a slightly dark figure in this book, because he does bring in Devika into this world of cinema. He's the one who introduces her to cinema. He's the one whom she signs her first contract with. And then, of course, they get married. And she works as an art director on his some of his films before they make their first talkie, Karma. But I think almost immediately after their marriage, she discovers that he already has a young child from another woman.
Yeah.
And these letters, which I also have, which this woman is writing constantly to Himanshu, saying, asking for money for the child, etc. They were not married. That woman and Mary Heinlein and Himanshu were not married, but they seem to have had a child. And this was what there is, he is constantly asking, her not to get in touch with him because he simply doesn't have the money. He's still a struggling producer. He cannot support her. So Devika obviously becomes privy to this because the lady then goes to the studios and starts saying that I will get the money from the studios if you don't pay me. So I think for a struggling film producer yet to make his first talkie with this gorgeous woman whom he's probably his wife, whom he's promised the sun, moon, and stars, it would have been a very difficult situation. Alongside come other letters from, for example, a German widow whom he had again had probably an affair with. That is quite apparent from the letters she writes, and borrowed money from. So, as I said, Himanshu had no qualms about, but that's the film world. I think it may not be exploitative. It may be something like he probably felt that this was the way forward. He would borrow money from anybody who was willing to give it to him in order to make cinema. But I think for a young woman who was in love with him, it would have been difficult to take all these letters coming in from various women talking about affairs that they have had together. And secondly, I think it was also because he obviously didn't have much money. So this was a problem because Devika then had to sell all her jewelry, whatever she had. Remember, she comes from a fairly, not a very well-to-do family, but definitely she has, as she writes in her letters, she did have very good clothes, very good jewelry, and so on. And in order to survive in Germany, she had to sell a lot of that stuff. So, and I think Himanshu never really acknowledged that fact that she had to make all these sacrifices in order to make the cinema that he wanted, and of course she wanted to make. So I think things were tough for her. There was a sense of betrayal, probably. There was a sense of hardship. But she was a real trooper. Once, what I like about her and why I was so fascinated and wanted to write this book is that she is a complete survivor. Not for 1 minute does she just sit down and say, oh my God, this is terrible. I'm never going to, go forward.
She's sorry for herself.
Never, never. There is not a single, and I've got most of this information from letters, from documents from that period. So I know that not for a minute did she pity herself. Yes, she was a real survivor, and she does a brilliant job with her first film. And then they both come back to India to begin their dream studio, Bombay Talkies. And nobody would have imagined that there is a rift between them. But gradually, in the next couple of years, there are the early signs of a breakdown that Himanshu would eventually have. And he does begin to physically abuse her. And this would have been very difficult because nobody knows this. I mean, I spoke to so many people, but no one mentioned. And I said, I got to know this because she wrote about it in letters that she wrote to Svetoslav. And she talks about how Himanshu, hits her so much that occasionally she just faints, she's bleeding, and she's lying on the floor and, unable to get up. But she has to get up and act the next day, and she has to cover up everything that has happened. And she keeps on talking about how badly she has been treated and the scars that she carries. But this is not for public display. This is something that she keeps very private.
Why don't you think she took it public? I mean, she was the darling of the masses, and she was also a victim of domestic abuse. Her husband was beating her up. Why don't you think she went public with it?
I think it was because of the fact that she wanted not to be pitied by anybody. You know, you must remember we're talking about a very, very patriarchal society. There were no women's groups that she could
I
go
mean,
to.
even
She was also a very private person,
yeah.
and I do refer to in the book in another letter. You know, sometimes you have to go back to see the psychological impact of incidents that have happened in early childhood. So in her case, fortunately, she does write about them. So she writes about this incident when she is in a school in Britain, and she goes and asks for some extra food. She's denied the food and she's locked up. Instead, it's a very strict school. So I from that moment onward, she says, I took a vow. I'm an Indian girl living in a foreign country. She's only 12 years old, but she vows to herself. And she says, I will never spread my hands in front of anybody ever again and ask them for anything, because they sort of punish her every time she kind of steps out of line, and she decides that whatever she does, she will not show that she has been hurt or upset in any way. So she learned this to be steely. And also remember, she was practically living by herself. I mean, her parents were not in England at the time that she meets Himanshu. She's a young girl. When she meets him, she's even younger than 21, and she's only about 17 or 18 years old. And she's earning her own money. You know, she's earning her own money, going out, gathering, doing little jobs here and there. But but this is something which she continues to do, and she does not feel that she needs to depend on anyone. And I think that was one of the reasons why she kept this domestic abuse also very, very quiet, very, very secret. All the pain she suffered, she kept to herself.
Actually, I don't blame her, because even in today's India, I mean, if a woman raises a voice against a powerful man in the Me Too movement, you can have defamation cases against you. So, I
Yeah.
mean, Devika Rani in the 30s trying to say something about a successful producer making, I don't know, it
The,
must
the
have
the
been
other thing
really
was that because they had a project together, you know, they were making cinema together, so she didn't want it to fall apart. She also wanted to be a successful career woman. You know, this was very important to her, which is why I like her so much, because she wanted financial independence. You know, she didn't want to be just a wife to somebody. She wanted to be somebody who actually contributed to cinema. So I think she pushed all these things under the carpet. She felt she had no time to deal with any of this. She dealt with it in her own way, in a private way. She didn't want any gossip about it. She just decided that because they had already set up what was a private limited studio with shareholders, she did not want it to sink under by an ugly scandal or something like that. So she was very quiet about it. And some may even say, in some way, she was loyal in her own way to Himanshu, and she didn't want to sully his image while he was alive, and she did not do it even afterwards, because I found out, because she wrote about it, but these were letters she wrote to her second husband, so she never made it public.
And she was not just an actress, she was also the producer. And the history of Bombay talkies is so well documented in your book. There's so much to learn from it. I think that's what the reviews are all saying. That the book is also about Devika Rani, and it's also about, the production houses, the early production houses of the Hindi film industry. And
Yeah.
and I
You
think
know, I just found it fascinating, Gayatri, because again, we do not take history seriously. I mean, my last book was on Jallianwala Bagh, and that was a completely different, it was a very bloody massacre. It was something which changed the Indian freedom struggle. It brought forward, people who became martyrs eventually, like Udham Singh and Bhagat Singh. But do you know that when I started writing that book, I realized there was just so much information that nobody knew about. And this was then for me a struggle to again put it together. I had to again hunt for material, hunt for information, get it all together. So my point is that whether it be cinema or it be Indian history, we in India particularly have very little respect for the people who are the pioneers in that field, and we somehow tend to take it for granted. Ye to aise tha, that kind of thing, without actually going into the nuances. Bombay Talkies was an amazing studio. It was spread over hundreds of acres in Malad. It was also something where people who worked there lived together, and they used to get up. It was run like a school, and even Dilip Kumar remembers that, run like a school. The bell would ring in the morning. They would all troop down to give their shots and things like that,
And
and
they
they would
gave us so
gather.
many of India's superstars, the names we
Yeah,
recognize.
yeah.
Philip
So I think
Kapoor.
all of that made the studio a very a studio where, of course, they were making 3 films a year, which was quite a record, churning them out. But they wanted to give profits to their shareholders, and so they hired. And the other thing they did, Gayatri, which was, I think, a game changer for Indian cinema, was that both Himanshu and Devika wanted to bring in educated people, because they were bringing in financiers who were from all kinds of backgrounds, including a British gentleman who was halfway in love with Devika, Sir Richard Temple. So I think they wanted that people should respect the studio, should respect filmmakers. And so this was one of the conditions, very early conditions that they set down for setting up the studio, was that everybody should be educated, which meant that, at that time, there were a lot of these singing and dancing girls. Nothing against that. I think some of them were extremely talented and went on to do very well. I do want to clarify, I don't have any issues about that, but this was certainly their thinking at the time, that in order to give respect to the industry, they must bring in people who work and act, and are educated, and therefore can be ambassadors for cinema. And certainly Devika became the public face.
Because
And I can tell you, without without any qualms about it, is that certainly most of the people who were investing, once they met her, they were completely charmed by her. She worked very hard. They used to get up at 8 in the morning, as I said, go to the studio, and then the bell would ring. They would all, and she was training people, all the training that she had received. She was training them to sing, to dance, to act, and she herself. So this was a very unusual woman. You do not find that happening with any other Indian film actress who was carrying so many responsibilities at that time. So, we need to acknowledge that as well.
absolutely. And as he said, they wanted to bring in more educated people, and Devika herself was a grandniece of Rabindranath Tagore. Her father was a doctor. That was also a path she could have chosen, but she chose to get into film. There is a whole section on it how Himanshu tells her that we'll be getting more people that you can, like you, not just, as you said, the singing and dancing kinds. That's why you called her the Bengal Tigress also.
No, the Bengal tigress comes in later, actually. These are the early years when she is still in the acting phase, in sort of exploring the kind of cinema that they need to do together. But as I mentioned in the book, the abuse comes in, and then in fact, in her very second film, the first one is called Jawani Ki Hawa, very I think prophetically, and in which she meets this extremely handsome. And I have to say that if anybody looked at him today, unfortunately, I'll tell you why his career kind of died an early death. But Najmul Hussain was a man who was good looking. He was a great actor from the film that I have seen, and he became her confidant. And I think somewhere along the line, this abuse that she was facing, the fact that she was not being able to get a single day off, she had to be in front of the camera all the time in order to produce the cinema. That it was like a machine, 3 films a year, 3 films a year. So she was just going from one to the other with nonstop. She was probably exhausted, but I think the scales began to fall from her eyes, because she also realized that the man that she loved probably had no time for her anymore, And so she falls in love with Najmul Hussain, and they run away to Calcutta together. She's persuaded then to come back. See, this was the amazing thing. She comes back, but she does not come back as somebody who has done something wrong. She holds her head high, and she comes back, and she continues to be the star of Bombay Talkies. So this was Devika. This was her. And again, I want to go back to her childhood to figure out how she reached this particular strategy. Devika was always a strategist, which is the other thing I find interesting about her. Some of her strategies you may agree with, some you may disagree with, but as a young child, and this is at the age of 3, she remembers that her father scolded her, father whom she absolutely adored. And I think it's my theory that she was always looking for a father figure her entire life, someone to take care of her the way her dad used to. And she's only 3, and he scolds her, and she runs away from home. But it's a successful maneuver, because then she's persuaded to come back. And I mean, she just doesn't go very far. She just goes and sits outside and in the garden. But it's a memory that sticks with her. So this time she tries it with Himanshu. She runs away with this guy, probably saying that I'm not going to tolerate the abuse you shower upon me. I want like more respect. I want certain things to go my way. And certainly that's what happens. So he, in fact, out of the two, you would say that the husband who's been cuckolded or who's been sort of abandoned by an adulterous wife would have the upper hand. But in fact, it is she who has the upper hand when she comes back. And not only I say this, because it's quite obvious from even people who are documenting that period, people like Manto, Saadat Hasan Manto, the writer, who was there at that time. And some of the things he says, he does not know the truth. So I know why she ran away, what she did. But certain things he does mention is how Himanshu, in fact, the tables were turned. And when she returned, he became far more dependent on her in many ways, because he was also, as I said, in the early stages of his own personal breakdown, and he needs her more than ever in order to keep the studio going. And that is in fact the film in which Jeevanaya, in which this very shaky, very scrawny, very funny Ashok Kumar has his debut. And it is hilarious. I've seen those films and I just died laughing when I saw them, because he's petrified. Himanshu tries to persuade Ashok Kumar to become an actor. Why Ashok Kumar? Well, because they wanted somebody who was Devika proof. That's the only word. Because she ran away, they did not ever want her to face a handsome, good-looking actor ever again, because they were always fearful that she would do the guy would fall in love with her and they would run away again. So they wanted someone who was like completely unappealing. And I have to say, in this early film and the early films, Ashok Kumar looks pretty, shaky. He's not the kind of suave Ashok Kumar that we see in later films. And so he is literally trembling in front of her. And off screen, he's begging Himanshu, why do you want to do this to me? Why do you want to ruin my life by making me into an actor? I want to be a sound recordist. He even gets his father to come with some job offers from some income tax department. And he said, let me take him back to Bombay, putting him in income tax and things like that. He tries to shave his hair off. He tries all kinds of things, but they just insist. They cannot get anybody more timid than him to face Devika. And they think Devika will never, ever fall in love. And this instance will never be repeated. But they didn't know that they were making history by choosing Ashok Kumar.
The film industry without Dada Mune.
Yeah, can you imagine? Yeah. And he came in such a funny way. I mean, in the very first scene, I have to tell you this, is that when he's supposed to rescue, in the first scene which he shoots as an actor, he's supposed to rescue Devika from the hands of this villain, and so he jumps in through the window in order to rescue her, window of her house. And he jumps straight onto the villain, who unfortunately breaks his leg, actually, broke his leg. And Devika has to be like, kept on medication and sort of hospitalized for the next 3 months, because she's also so shaken up by what had happened. So Himanshu tells him, he says, you did that, you took that very seriously, didn't you? First piece of acting that you had to do. So he kind of smashes up everything. But he becomes a very fine actor. And I think in their later films that you mentioned, the Truth Kanya, what a superb job they do. What a lovely couple they make. And the film, they give hit after hit, you know. So things kind of stabilize on the cinema front because now they finally have a good actor to play opposite Devika. I have to say that some of the other people they choose are really the pits. It really did not seem to matter to them. This is amazing. Huh? She was the one who carried the films on her shoulders. It does not matter. You see some of these actors whom they put in front of Devika, and you say, why? Why did they do this to her? You know, because she was like so beautiful, and they are really, sorry to say, but pretty much forgettable. And but Ashok became the savior of that period, and he and Devika gave hit after hit thereafter.
Yeah. I think that we can just go on and on discussing Devika and the book, but there's here one comment from Reema Maheshwari. She says, I recommend that everyone should watch the play Devika Rani made by Lilith Dubey, starring Ira Dubey. If it comes to the theatre post COVID, it's based on Kishwar's book. I have seen it and it's really well made. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think I wrote that the play before the book had come out, and I think it really came off well. I was worried at a time that because there is so much more in the book, and that I could not actually put all that information in. So, but I'm really happy if you liked it, and that it communicated the spirit of Devika. And yes, Lilette and Ira did a great job with
We
that
have
play.
a couple of questions on the book, but we'll come to it later. And now let's transition to the other important work that you've been associated with recently. That's the Partition Museum in Amritsar. So I mean, so different from what we've been discussing here, or is it not that different, Kishwar?
Well, I no, it is very different because this is cinema, and this is something that I did, recently. The Partition Museum was a dream I had maybe 20, 25, or maybe 30 years ago. I always felt that, the people who suffered during partition, again, I think it is linked in a way because I'm worried about history. I'm worried about the fact that we don't have enough. Yes,
Right.
enough documents, enough, and especially people's history. I'm not so fascinated by the history of the leaders because we have enough of them. We know enough about Nehru and Gandhi and Jinnah and people like that. What we don't know are of the people who have been forgotten. And I think for me, the Partition Museum was important because the museum is a people's museum. I wanted it to represent the history of the people who went through the partition, who actually suffered the partition, who lost everything, who lost their homes, often, their friends, their parents, grandparents, children. And how do they deal with it? How do they come out of it and yet become part of India? And many of them went on to become the people who actually, including my own parents, who in some way or the other helped in the rebuilding of like my father was part of the first police force that came out of independent India. And yet they never spoke about it. I had never, ever, even though my parents had to move immediately and my mother's family lost everything, so did many of their friends. Lose a lot in terms of the bloodshed that they witnessed and things like that, but I never saw them complain. I never saw them say a word. And I was like very worried that once this generation goes, nobody will ever know what exactly happened to those people. So around 5 years ago, no, now six, I think 2015,
You
I set
set
up,
up the trust.
sorry?
You set up the trust.
I set up the trust. Yes, I set up a small trust, and we just roped in my some good friends like this Bindu Manchanda, who was doing heritage, and also Dipali, who was also there, and my own daughter. I roped her in. So there were only four of us. We were the founder members of the museum, as it were. And then we decided that, come what may, we have to try and make this happen. We have to try everything. So we had several awareness raising sessions because I think people didn't quite understand what does a partition museum mean? What will it have in it? So we did a presentation at the IIC. We were expecting like 20 people to turn up, but the 1,500 people came. They were like breaking down the door in order to get
Wow.
in, which was amazing. So many of my friends couldn't attend that session because they said it was amazing. And then we got so much love from everybody that please do this. People, my parents themselves gave me this wonderful book, which was the last remnant of my grandfather's library, which had been carried across the border at the time of partition. And the media was very helpful. So the media started tracking our progress. They started showing the things which people were giving to us, the documents, the letters, and then it just became a movement. And obviously we couldn't afford Delhi, and I needed to set up a physical museum. So we went to Amritsar. And I think that was just by chance. But it was probably the best thing that could have happened, because the government then and the government now was very, very supportive. They gave us this beautiful, I mean, we went through quite a struggle, but that's for another
I
day. It's a
find it
story.
I find it absolutely incredible that in 2 years between setting up the trust and you
Yeah.
opened the Partition
Not even
Museum
two
in
years, not even 2
2017.
years.
Yeah,
The curtain raiser was set up in 2016. When we started, we had no money, we had no building. We didn't even, like most museums start with a collection. We had no collection either. We had nothing with us. So that is why I'm saying that the power to dream is sometimes more important than what we know. And somehow, people started coming forward, helping, etc. But I must say that the government was then extremely good. They gave us this building in Punjab, and the government of Punjab at that time, and so we got this town hall. But then we had to raise the resources, the funding, that this, that, and there I have to say that because we decided to engage young people in this, because the whole idea was we are the generation that forgot our history, but the next generation, or rather my daughter's generation, and people like her must be able to do something. They must be able to rectify this. So thanks to her and her friends and many, many interns that joined us at that time, we were able to set up this. And of course the donors, the funders, and all the wonderful people who give money and things like that, we were able to set up this museum. In the first, it was a curtain raiser exhibition. It was only 3 galleries. That was all that we could afford. Then we went on to do the complete. It has now 14 galleries. It is 17,000 square feet. It has won, I think, I forget, 6 or 7 awards. It has been, covered by everybody. You just name the channel or the
yeah.
newspaper or the media house. Everybody has covered it.
And the
And
location is also so brilliant. The location is so just
yeah,
with
yeah,
the
it's
5 minutes
right next
to walk
door.
is the Golden
Yeah.
Temple.
Golden Temple, yeah. Jallianwala Bagh and Golden Temple. So it becomes like a very good tour. If you want to have the history of Punjab, then definitely, because in the museum, we also talk about Punjab, undivided Punjab. We start from there, and then because we wanted people to have a sense of the culture and the history before partition, and the damage that the partition did. So we have like the whole museum is like a book with 14 chapters, and each gallery tells a narrative. It takes you forward, which is why we've been very grateful that people have liked it and appreciated it so
Yeah,
much. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something I've really been wanting to do ever since I've heard of it. Do you also have any plans of taking it, the Partition Museum to say a Bengal, because Bengal was also so badly affected
Yes,
by the Partition Museum?
we do have a very key Bengal section in the museum, which is now being expanded. And certainly, I think over the next few months, you will hear something. I don't want to give away, because
Okay.
our team is working on that, not just Bengal, but other places as well. Because I think people have understood the importance of this, because it doesn't just work as a museum. It is very emotive. It also talks about the lives of ordinary people, and I think very few museums in India do that, because most of the museums are about the either the wealthy, the rajas, maharajas, and this and that.
Yeah.
But this actually describes what happens to people when an event like this takes place, but also who they were, where they came from. And the most important things are the objects that they've given us. And that makes the museum so moving. I mean, even I can't help crying when I go there. And I know that even people who lead very busy lives, once they go there, for example, when Shabana asked me, she just wept, she just walked through the galleries and she was so immensely moved. And we've had prime ministers and the presidents visiting. We had Trudeau visiting, so it's, and Manmohan Singh ji has been there, as well as other dignitaries. Arun Jaitley ji went there, and the Badals went there. So, it's like something that makes you remember that freedom was not just won by the people whom we call freedom fighters. It was also won by these many, many millions who quietly crossed the border when they were told to do so. They became victims in many ways, but they were the ones who also, because had they refused to move, God knows what would have happened. And those poor people were not even given a chance to put. So all that is documented, what
That's what you
happened,
mean when you
Mount
say
Battle.
People's Museum. Sorry, that's what you mean
The
when you say
People's
People's
Museum.
Museum. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
There is a
People's Museum.
comment here from Divya. She says, Kishwar, visiting the Partition Museum was just the best experience for my family just before COVID. My
Oh,
grandparents all came to India during partition, and the museum is such a testimony to their spirit.
thank you, Divya. It's things like this which keep us going. It's very tough. We are still in the process. Because we are NGO, a not-for-profit. We have to constantly keep raising money. COVID was very tough on us because the museum was shut for 9 months, so we earned nothing. We used to get a ticket is only 10 rupees, so we used to get a little bit of money through that. Even that stopped. So through your channel, I would also like to say that if anybody wants to donate or support the museum in any way, we would be very grateful. Connect with us if you've got an oral history, an object to share, anything at all. You can get in touch with me directly, and I'll put you in touch with our team members. As I said, the young people who are really running it. We are just the as I said, the public faces who are trying to take it forward now. But I don't actually deal with it on a day-to-day basis. We have managers, young people, mostly women. It's so surprising. A lot of our manager in Amritsar is a woman. A manager in Delhi is a woman. So, and very, very thrilled. And all
My
young people.
son's roommate in college also worked with the partition at the Partition Museum.
Oh, wow. Okay. Uh-huh.
Anyway, so can we now move to the third segment of this Gupshup, which is about you, Kishwar, and
Wow.
your personal journey? Yeah, there's a lot of interest. One comment I got was Kishwar is as much of an enigma as Devika, and we
Not
want
at
to
all.
discover. Yeah. So I believe you said you're a romantic at heart. And I can you would you like to tell our audience about what role Dilip Kumar played in getting you married?
Yes, that was quite amazing that Dilip Kumar played Cupid in such a big way. Very unlikely Cupid. This was a book which my husband had written, actually, Nehru's hero, Dilip Kumar in the Life of India. And for some reason, I had quit television. I used to be in television for a long time, maybe 20 years or something. I had quit because I wanted to go and write a book. Write a book. So I joined a publishing house. I thought, that would quieten me down because television is just so hectic and you never get time to sit down and think. And at that time, this was one of the first books that came to me to edit and to go through. I had to meet the author. And when the author came into town, I had no clue who he was. Somehow we had never met, though later on we discovered we had lots of friends in common. Yes, I think that bit is like Devika and Swetoslav, you can say, because even though they had a lot of things in common, they had never met, either when she meets him, her second husband. So similarly, Meghnad and I had never met, but once we met, I believe he decided, this is his version, not mine, is that he decided that he wanted to marry me without knowing anything about me.
Wow.
Whether I was already married, whether I had children, which I did, whether I was married, which I was. whether I would even agree to see him again, which I was eventually persuaded to, and things like that. Because in India, we were both kind of. I mean, I was well known in my own sphere because I'd been on television, and he, of course, was an intellectual, is an intellectual, and extremely well known. So I was a little hesitant. What is this relationship going to be like? But he was, I must say, Meghnad is also romantic. And he, having written this book on Dilip Kumar, I think he also uh, has a great repertoire of Hindi film songs, which he sang a lot in order to woo me. So
Wow.
I think
You sing too,
it
Kishwar?
was,
Do you sing too?
sorry.
Do you sing also?
Not at all, not at all. And then he would call me and we would have these long conversations. Actually, this was a romance which was conducted mostly on the telephone. It was like a old-fashioned Hindi film romance. And so he would call me from London and we would talk for hours and hours. And I think somehow that was really perfect because we got to know about each other without even ever having held hands or anything. But we were able to know who we were, what our problems were, what our dreams were, what our background was. And I think that was a perfect way of doing it. I'm very happy it happened that way. So by the time he came back to India, he went away for a few months, came back. We already knew each other very well. And I think we were kind of quite certain that somehow we would get married.
How
And
lovely.
I think then things kind of conspire, everything came together beautifully. And yes,
How
it's
lovely,
been good
Kishwar.
fun. It's been good fun ever since. Gayatri, I have a question. Do you want me to put the light on because it's getting very dark in where I'm
Yes,
sitting,
okay,
or you
sure,
can still
sure.
see?
Would you like to put the
No,
light on?
no.
Yes.
Is it okay for you?
I think the light would be better.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just go and put
Yeah.
it on.
Yeah.
One second.
Any more questions? Please put them in the chat box. Sangeeta, would you like to read your comment about the Partition Museum?
Who? Sorry.
Sangeeta?
Hi, Kishwar. I don't know if you can hear me.
Hi.
This is Singh.
Sorry, I can't see you.
Yeah.
I can hear
So
you.
I
Yeah.
just want you to know I'm in a dark place. So, but I don't know if you
Okay.
can see me. Yeah. So
Yes.
I'll just speak. I think you can hear me. Yeah. So yeah. So I visited the Partition Museum in Mumbai when it traveled there, and I was totally blown because here were the stories that I'd heard from my dadi and from my father all through my life, and it had just come alive. And there was a room where they were hanging up letters. They said, you can write a letter as though you belonged to that period. And I just spent so much time there writing that down and hanging it up on with a clothes clip on that string, that image has just stayed with me. And the objects that came along, the letters that were never received, all of that, it suddenly became real. And you're so right that we took these memories for granted because we grew up with them and they would be related to us time and again. But it is our children to whom this seems so real. It's like, in many ways, that wow, this actually happened. For me, it came to life when I went to the Partition Museum. It really hit me. So yeah, thank you for being one of the, being the person who drove this. Grateful to you. My father
Um,
is no more. I lost him last year, but I'm so glad that I could live the museum and share it with him um, via photographs and films. And I went alone, so the experience was all the more poignant. I wanted to go alone. Yeah, really soaked it in. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you,
well,
Sangeeta.
if you have anything you would like to share with us, I would be grateful if you could connect with us. And we are constantly expanding the collections, because these were millions of people who were disrupted in 1947. It is never going to be completed, because 20 million people who are disrupted, it's going to be very tough to record all the memories. So we really request anybody who has anything to share, object, letters, diaries, we would be very, very grateful if you did that. If you could reach out, we will be putting up more collections. So if you can share those with us, be great. I don't know if you recorded your father while he was alive, but
Yes, I
it
do
would
have
be.
many. I have many recordings, and my father-in-law is still alive, and he talks a lot about his little town, which is now submerged under the
Oh,
waters of the dam. So yeah, so there are stories all around.
please do share that with us, because
Yeah.
my email is very simple. It's Kishwar Desai at gmail.com, or Lady Kishwar Desai at gmail.com. If you could reach out, please, because I think this is the only way we can honor that generation for the sacrifices that they made, and indeed how hard they struggled. I think when they came with nothing, and that is the other part, is how inspirational these stories are, in the museum, because you just see people having been completely wiped out with not even anything to eat, dealing with injured family members, coming here, and yet, somehow struggling, getting jobs, we have people who were orphaned, and then they rose to become captains of industry. And I think those stories need to be remembered now more than ever, even after COVID, also, because we saw those images of the migrant labor, reminded me so much of the refugees who lost their homes at that time. And so the suffering carries on. And yet, when you go to a museum like that, I do hope when people do come away, yes, they take the memories of all of that and the historical significance of it, but also I think inspiration that, yes, we can rebuild our lives, we can do something with ourselves, even after we've been wiped out.
There are lessons in
Other.
resilience of the
Yeah,
highest
Put in
order.
touch with each other.
yeah,
Sangeeta, I'll
yeah,
put you in touch with Kishwar. I'll put you both
yeah.
together.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's another question from Aarti. She says, "How do we see Devika Rani's movies? Any authentic sources for watching
Yeah,
the films?"
yeah, sure. I mean, some of them are online. I mean, like, Karma, I know, at least it was. I don't know whether it still is. So that's online. At least two or three, if I remember correctly, of her films. So if you just Google Devika Rani, you'll be able to see it online. I saw most of them at the National Film Archives. So I don't know if you can access Pune. If you can reach there, then definitely that's a great place to sit and watch films anyway. Yeah, because it's surrounded by memorabilia and all kinds of things.
Absolutely. Thank you for writing about Devika Rani, a strong woman who fought against the odds in a male dominated society. Why were women always projected as weak and meek? The question is from Sanjana.
Yeah. Well, actually, to be honest, Devika was not projected as weak and meek. Rather, she was projected as somebody who was an adulteress and was incompetent and unable to work and run a studio. Because that is the image of most actresses at that time, was that they were incapable of doing anything without, yes, in that sense, without a man, without the patronage of a man. So weak in that sense, yes. She always needed a male companion in order to do something. But she also had, unfortunately, these other words attached to her name, which was because she ran away with Najam. And then later on, she wanted to take over Bombay Talkies, which in a very, very patriarchal society, and also very patriarchal. I mean, she was surrounded by men completely. And I have to say this, that because when I go through the minutes, I have the minutes of the meetings, which took place at Bombay Talkies. She's the only woman present. I mean, she's the only kind of woman, prominent woman shareholder present, only woman present in the board meetings. So you can imagine how difficult it must have been to deal with a bunch of men all the time. And when she wants to become what she thinks was her rightful place after Himanshu dies, the manager of Bombay Talkies, as well as the controller of productions, all the people gang up against her, all the men gang up against her, till she throws them out. And I think that is the part which all women should read in the book, how she strategizes, how she plots, plans, which would have been, a coup. if a man did it, but because a woman did it, they were like very resentful, that, but she had a lot of admirers also,
Yeah.
and those letters are also in the book. People who admired the way she threw all these people out for plotting and planning against, so which unfortunately also included Ashok Kumar, because they went off and set up a rival studio, which many of you may still know because it's still functioning in some way or the other. At least the title is still there, Filmistan. So, I mean, the original didn't last very long, but definitely the title of the studio is still there, Filmistan. Yeah.
Do you have time for a couple more questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. There is one from Namita who says there's so much bitterness that the current India carries with it about partition, but I did not see the bitterness in my grandparents and parents. Does the museum help lead to more understanding and less bitterness? Do you do?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think this was, sorry, was that the complete question,
Yes,
or
yes.
did I?
Do you do a conscious effort in curating towards this end, in removing
Yes.
bitterness?
Yeah. Yeah, what we did was, we have, as I told you, 14 galleries. We needed to take people through the trauma and the pain and the divisions and the loss and everything. So each gallery, as I said, deals with a different thing. Like one gallery deals only with the migration, another gallery deals with it's called the Gallery of Refuge, how people came and they had to live in tents and had very little, etc. But the last gallery is called Gallery of Hope, because we always wanted that people who came to the museum must leave with a sense of understanding that this is not the way things should have ever been. This should have never happened. These divisions should never have taken place. So in the last gallery, we have very inspirational stories. And we also have stories about people who went home, after partition, and the kind of, very generous, very both sides, the kind of response they got when they went what was their former home, and how much love is showered upon them. So I think those are the kind of things then in that gallery, when people look around, they see that it's not necessary to for something like that to happen. You need to remember this, that you can still have had those experiences but not have that bitterness. You can still live well as communities together. So that is the message which people carry when they walk out of the museum. And again, like that lady earlier had mentioned, we have a tree of hope there, and on that, people, on the leaves of that, it's made of barbed wire, but the leaves are green. They're green pieces of paper, because we thought that you can green this. You can take barbed wire and cover it with greenery, and thereby cover it with hope. And so people write their messages of peace and love or whatever and hang it there. So that is how we try and change the narrative.
Okay. Last question for today, Kishwar. Are you working on your autobiography?
Never. I don't think so. I mean, I don't know how people write their autobiographies. I think
Priyanka
I'm not
Chopra
even
written
there.
it at 39.
I'm not. I've not done anything so exciting as that. I feel I'm certainly working on a couple of other books, which I'm very excited about. And I think that is my problem. I just finish one thing and then I'm already deep in another one. And I'm so exhausted most of the time. I don't know how how am I ever going to, and even the next one is going to be like deeply researched, again about a woman who's not been very much talked about, was a game changer. And there is a novel which is a historical novel which also requires a lot of research. And there are a couple of other projects going up. So there is just a lot on my plate.
I'm
you know
already looking forward to our next Gupshup with your on your
yeah.
next novel.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think you love that.
yeah,
You love that because she's also very spunky and a very interesting, and a rebel. I love women who are rebels, because I think we need to break the rules more often so that people know that we can do what any man can do. We can probably do better.
absolutely. And on that note, no one could have said it better. Yes, we women need to break the rules and do things that have not been done before. So thank you very much. It's been such a pleasure having you on Gupshup with Gayatri. Thank you everyone for joining in, and look forward to many more interesting episodes of season 2. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gayatri. Lovely talking to all of you. Thanks a lot. Hope you
Thank
guys had
you.
a good time. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.